Hello everyone, it's Ren here. Happy Sunday, guys. Today we're going to be talking about INFJs in the role of teachers. This is coming from a suggestion, not just for a topic, but for a series. So a kind of an ambitious undertaking that I'm trialing today by talking about the topic of teachers. This supporter, who shall remain unnamed by their own request, says, this is something that I want to read just to contextualize this topic a little bit. He says, the question is not whether INFJs are good or bad at being, e.g., teachers, historians, mathematicians, storytellers, nurses, writers, any particular role, or what was the other, athletes, because after all, these exist too. They're not the ones that come to mind, to begin with, but rather, so not to determine whether they're good or bad, okay, but rather in true Wittgensteinian spirit, after the philosophy of Ludwig Wittgenstein. How does an INFJ perform, define and redefine, and engage with that role / archetype? What examples of INFJs in these particular roles do we know of? How does Myers-Briggs / Jungian psychoanalysis help us understand the ways they perform or performed these roles? Actor is another one. So what's really interesting about this topic, what I like about the suggestion is, well, first of all, it's substance for a new series, so that's always good. It's a mix. It's a blend that I really like between the practical, right, talking about concrete cases, the concrete, and the more philosophical, this kind of Wittgensteinian approach where we're trying to analyze, what lies behind these particular forms of engagement, and the ways in which the INFJ type appropriates the roles and brings their own touch to the definition and to the articulation of the role. So I don't think that I'm going to have an introductory section on what Wittgenstein was saying, because the question and the topic series as it has been laid out seems to be pretty straightforward. So I'll jump straight into INFJs as teachers, because a teacher, obviously a very important role in today's society, an archetype as well, especially young people relate to the figure of the teacher. And it's often said that, that there's a particular kind of relationship between the INFJ type and teaching. So it's interesting and worthwhile to look into it a bit more. Before I move on any further, just remember I've written 2 books, my new novel, The Infinite Castle, and The Ecstatic Soul. So if you're interested in getting any of these books, or either one, their links are down below. They're both less than $10 and they're very nice. And you can check the reviews on Amazon as well if you're interested. Reviews are pretty good. So INFJs as teachers. It's on paper not the most difficult topic to discuss, because again, when we think INFJ, we think of a more direct line of connection between that type and teaching than, say, between that type and cooking, or that type and being an athlete. So that doesn't necessarily mean that we've said everything once we've said that, because there's different kinds of teaching, there's different levels of teaching, there's different approaches, and there's also different ways of making teaching your own. How you mold both yourself into the teaching and the teaching into your own personality. So what I would say is, there seems to be, to me, right, there seems to be 3 kinds of INFJ in relation to teaching. Number 1, there's the INFJ that has no real interest in teaching. it seems to me that these INFJs tend to be very NI heavy. Okay, they tend to be very NI heavy. Perhaps they have a kind of, what's called sometimes double introversion. In other words, that their two most prominently displayed function are NI and TI. So quite possibly it is those INFJs that have this NI and TI activation and relative repression of FE they're going to be the ones that are the least interested in teaching. Now the reason for this is that this double kind of introversion leads to a very singular form of introverted and introspective engagement with one's own vision. Now, in the Ecstatic Soul, I actually suggest that this is a form of alienation. Okay, alienation being a mode of being that is just as legitimate as non-alienation or as enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. But nevertheless, an alienation from the external world, refuge inside one's psyche. When you engage with the class, you kind of have to step out of that. In other words, you have to make yourself more social, make your insights such that they can be transferred to an audience, communicated, and that in turn the audience can respond back to you. So the very kind of NITI type of INFJ is likely to not enjoy the idea very much because it will make them feel exposed, vulnerable, and that they will not have this required safety to develop their vision, what they consider to be their unique sort of perspective on the world, safely. Because intrusion by other perspectives is going to be perceived as potentially endangering the perspective that is coming from the introvert. Usually when a function is devalued is when that function is seen as dangerous. And it is considered, it is estimated that nothing really positive for the ego can be done with that function, hence why it's devalued, in this case FE. Once FE is more valued, well, when FE is more integrated, as it ought to be for an INFJ, really. Suddenly you start seeing all positives and very few negatives. Now the second category of INFJ that I want to talk about is the INFJ with only NI, not only NI, but functions of relative integration, maybe with the exception of SE, but with a strong prominence of the NI function. In other words, instead of having mostly NI and TI on display, you almost have what looks like a pure distillation of NI. And I would put in that category also INFJs that are very NI heavy, but although the FE function is a little bit more shadowy, it's still there. It's stronger than TI, okay? So in that category of people, I would place people like, Carl Jung himself. Carl Jung had good TI, but the more I think about it, the more I read his stuff, I'm about 1/3 into his complete works now. His FE function is a lot stronger than we give him credit for, all right? And if people are interested in this, I can make a video on why I think it's very apparent from his writings. It's a very, very proactive FE function. Rupert Sheldrake is another one, current, contemporary thinker, contemporary scientist, the articulator of the theory of morphic resonance. If you guys, I'm sure some of you guys will be familiar with him. Otherwise, check him out. You'll notice that he's a very NI heavy INFJ. It's kind of not clear whether the TI dominates the FE or vice versa. But he's not in a state of looping between NI and TI. He enjoys engaging with audiences. Now, this second category of INFJ, what I would say is that they're probably made most for academic or university teaching, because the fact that they are aligned closely with their vision. Morphic resonance, Sheldrake has been sticking to this for 40 years. Jung, individuation, the collective unconscious, the transcendent function, all these kind of, at first like crazy ideas that he's stuck with. It's something that the INFJ will probably want to engage an audience that is already advanced in their level of knowledge and capable of fully appreciating the insights. They're not going to be as willing as the third category of INFJ that I'm going to talk about to go down into the ring and literally teach anyone, even younger students. Now, the third category is that category, and it's probably going to be the main category for INFJs, although it depends, maybe it's 50-50 between the second and the third. The first category, I think, is more unusual, and their first priority should be try to work on their FE function before thinking about teaching or anything like that, But the third category just has a good balance between NI and FE. Ideally, healthy TI that doesn't try to constantly sort of overtake FE. Possibly sometimes overtake NI. So, a balanced INFJ, well along the path of integration of the external world. That INFJ will be quite flexible, happy to, depending also on intelligence, it has to be said. Intelligence and how brilliant someone is might impact whether they might want to teach at more at a university level or not. But this kind of INFJ will thrive also in a school setting, because they'll have the FE. Not only will they have the FE that gives them pleasure when it comes to sharing their insights, their knowledge, and at some level their vision as well with a younger audience, and getting their insights in turn. There's two cats behind me, so just making sure they're okay. They were making a bit of noise. At the same time, they will, once you've tasted the integration of FE and what you can do with FE, especially when it's not dominant, because when it's dominant you take it for granted, but when it's auxiliary and you taste the amazing advantages and pleasures of FE, you tend to want more of it. So the INFJ in this situation is likely to really, really enjoy not just the collaborative aspect of teaching and being able to express what they want to express in a way that is accessible and a way that engages, but will probably enjoy the social aspect itself. In other words, it's when you get to a stage where it's not just about the transmission of knowledge, which is the priority, but also about a human experience, shaping students not just to be knowledgeable and to be good critical thinkers, but in some sense going into the domain of moral education, shaping them into being good human beings within reason. You don't want to take over the role of the family or anything like that, but usually that's what will happen with prominent involvement of the FE function. The NI-heavy INFJ, who also can thrive in positions of teaching, will tend to focus much more on the intellectual aspect and less on a moral aspect that comes in addition to the intellectual aspect. So I think that in some sense, I've been riffing on the theme because, again, these are hot takes. I don't know if I have given a Wittgensteinian account of how an INFJ performs and engages with the archetypes of the teacher, but my idea is that three broad types of INFJ make up NITI, NI-heavy, NI-FE. The three types correspond to three different approaches to teaching. One approach is no teaching. Another approach is intellectual teaching. Third approach is intellectual and moral teaching with all ages included, great pleasure experienced in engaging with a younger audience as well. So engaging in the sort of human aspect of teaching in addition to the intellectual aspect of teaching. What has to be emphasized maybe as a last point is throughout all these aspects, the INFJ is going to face the challenge of their introversion. Because a very extroverted teacher, in some senses, is an advantage. It's going to be dealing with people. Again, temptation to engage in academic teaching more so than school teaching allows you to be more of an introvert. You have lots of introvert lecturers after all. You know, maybe they give a lecture here and there. They can still do a lot of research. If you're in school, it's different, which is also why INFJs with more FE integrated will tend to have also a better balance between introversion and extroversion, and in fact come to enjoy a lot of extrovert activities, because we always have to remember teaching, like other activities, can provide an INFJ with the means to become more extroverted. And extroversion for an INFJ is an area of growth, which is, in other words, it's also an area of potential great pleasure if it is taken, you know, if it is properly understood and taken carefully, you know, not as indulgence in alcohol or I don't know what that makes you extroverted in an artificial manner, you know. So area of growth, getting out of your comfort zone, but it has to start with work on yourself and on your functions and the various features of your existential constitution as they come out and evolve, and how that interacts with the archetype. Okay, let me know what you think in the comments, guys. I'll see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.